Anyone want to say welcome, hello? Hopefully you can type, say hello. We've had a powerful Black Mental Health Week. And just last night, we did a chat with a Black men's panel. It was amazing. I feel inspired. And so I hope as we end off this amazing week that your soul is filled throughout. Hi, thank you so much for saying hi. Anyone else? Thank you. So glad you're here. Thank you. I appreciate all of you. I thought we will start with a quick poll because I love a poll questions. I've been doing it all week. Why are you here? I don't even know which one I'm launching. So I'm going to launch this one. I think it's a check. And I'd rather not honestly talk to you guys about grief and loss. I'd rather focus on things that we need to be excited about, joy, life coaching. However, unfortunately, in our experiences, grief is so inevitable and it permeates our lives in so many ways. So I just wanted to do a quick poll of the room and to see who's here. This is not the right one. Let's see. All right. So some quick questions, because I also want to be sensitive to the fact that you've had a recent loss. Your experiences are going to be heightened today. So if you've had experience of loss, feel free to share yes or no. Do you embrace changes in your life? Because obviously with grief and loss, it is also about changes in our life. So I'd love to hear where you're at when it comes to that. And what keeps you grounded, my most favorite question. So please fill it out and then we will get started. I see some people filling them out. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know, Curtis, can you fill it out or no?
I can see.
I can see it, but yeah, I can't fill it out either. So thank you everyone for filling it out. Yes, okay. All right. If you didn't get a chance, no worries, it's fine. I feel so bad to end it, but we've got 13 people, so that's pretty good. All right. So I want to share the results with you. So yes, 70% of us have experienced grief in the past year. So thank you for being here. Do you embrace changes and transitions in your life? Oh, there's some people just like me. I love consistency. Yes, 23% said yes. I embrace change. We have 31%. And all of the hesitants, you're with me too. 46% said they're hesitant to change. And this is my favorite question. What keeps you grounded? So absolutely rest. My family came in really high. Substances, 8%. Thank you. Agree. Meditation, 17%. Spirituality and prayer. I'll do my best to ensure that I give space for that. Importance of prayer. Music and the arts, absolutely. My talent, 17%. And the earth, water, and fire. So thank you. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. Thank you for being here. And for those who've experienced grief, we are with you today because we both have held on to grief over the past couple of months, year. And our purpose is really just to explore what does that mean for us. So we have an hour with us. My friend Curtis will help to respond to questions, but also help me to engage in dialogue. So thank you, Curtis, for being here. And we'll do our best to capture as much of the grief story in an hour and a half. And our goals today are to, understand what grief and loss means to us, to our community, to understand how race and culture identity intersects with grief and loss, because it does in so many different ways. And to hopefully land on exploring ways of healing, of grounding, and sheltering ourselves. I'm going to add in my experiences my reflections over the past year, but I also have some really good books that I picked up at my office that I also wanted to share with you as well. So I'll talk about that. So this book by David Archer, Self-Care for Grief, that I also picked up. And I have this book from 1999. It's like 24 years old, that I also picked up some gems in it. But if you have any books or any other podcasts that you feel that other people would really benefit from, please do not hesitate to just pop it in the chat. We're also here to learn from each other. And I also am encouraging and opening you up in the space to share as much as possible. So thank you. It is also being recorded, but my lovely friend Joshua will make some really great edits to make sure that no one's confidential information will be shared when it goes live. And so I wanted to maybe spend some time just talking about the importance for us to be here in this space, and the importance of our ancestors. And then we'll go into a land acknowledgement. And I wanted to do so where we can look at each other. I need to make my notes bigger, sorry. All right. I want to spend some time acknowledging our ancestors before us, the communities and the tribes, our people who lived before colonization and enslavement, those ancestors. The ancestors we grew up learning, and the values we adhere to, and the traditions and rituals that we adopted when our people were residing in Africa. I want to also acknowledge our ancestors who managed through the Middle Passage, who sought to thrive, not just survive. I also want to acknowledge our aunties, our uncles, our fathers, our mothers, the people that we knew, that we loved, those people who nurtured their dreams and their visions within us, for those ancestors that we knew and that we loved. And if you wish, say their names. Or feel free to type their names in the chat. We'll acknowledge them. I acknowledge the resilience, the resistance of our ancestors, their ability to grow, to heal, their beliefs that they had in themselves, and the abilities that they had to protect themselves and their children, us, the future generation, and the visions in which they planted within us. Our ancestors, I want to acknowledge. This quote always raffles me. So we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. So as we gather today, I only pray that we can open up really in a good way that enriches our growth and our development, and that we not only learn something new, but we also learn something new about ourselves today. So thank you for being here. I gotta make sure I have the right slide that I'm sharing with you. So another part of our acknowledgement is acknowledging the Indigenous people that resided on this land before us. And I'm sure many of you have heard a land acknowledgement and calls for action. But today I really want to encourage you to just share in the chat, where do you reside? Which territory do you reside in? And why are you grateful to be on this land as stewards? And whether you're on North American or Toronto, or whether you're abroad, I'd love to hear which land you are currently residing on and what you're grateful for as you sit on this land. I am currently on the lands of the Mississaugas of Squamish Island First Nations. And I'm just grateful that the land that I'm in is mixed suburban, mixed green space. And every time I have the privilege of driving through Ontario, I just see how beautiful it is, and I'm just grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have the honor to breathe in the fresh air, to be close to water when I need to. What about you, Curtis? What land are you on?
In the Mississaugas, not only am I in the Mississaugas land, but I actually live in Mississauga. So that's deep.
What are you grateful for being in Mississauga?
The richness of culture and diversity, the richness of the land, the open space, being close to the lake, you know, the warmth, the fresh air, especially on a summer day, being able to go close to the water and just relax and spend some time in reflection. That's where I do my meditation.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Mississaugas of credit. Anyone else want to share? Uh-oh. Oh my gosh, I just came from Grenada. Oh, that was so beautiful. Just, yes. And I have this like craving for sea moss. So if you know how to make sea moss, please try it if you're in Grenada and get the recipe. But it's breathtaking. I can't go on how much I loved it. Ottawa, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being here. And Ottawa's beautiful too. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you have to try sea moss. Yes, it's really good. Before we get started, I did want to engage you or invite you all into a grounding exercise. And the purpose of that is because our conversations are so deep today that we're talking about grief and loss. It's always important to come back to our breath or come back to our bodies, especially when we are triggered by thoughts, experiences, and our stories are going to be so much connected with each other. So I encourage you to just take this time to be still and to practice a grounding so that you can come back to it as we go through it. It is about 5 minutes. I'll stop it just before she gets to the end as well. And if it's choppy, I practice it. But if it is choppy, I do apologize if we're having a rough day with all of our videos and stuff. So I'll stop it if it gets too choppy. I'm sorry, I'm not sharing my computer sound.
Hey y'all, Nicole here. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for joining me. I'm Nicole. Today's video is an instant calm practice, so let's jump right into it. We're going to use this hand mudra called the Jala Shaya Mudra, and the Jala Shaya Mudra is supposed to help to calm your body and balance your emotions. So to do that, we're going to interlace our fingers, keeping our ring fingers and our pinky fingers extended and letting them touch. And just rest your hands down here near your belly, or rest your hands in your lap. Close your eyes. Make sure you are seated comfortably. Let's take a deep inhale through the nose. Exhale out the mouth. Take a second deep inhale through the nose. Exhale out the mouth. One more deep inhale through the nose. And exhale out the mouth. Good. Release the hands, sweep them up. Inhale. Interlace the fingers, press the palms away. Exhale, twist to your right. Bringing your left hand outside of your right knee or leg, right fingertips rest behind you. And we're going to flow to the other side. Inhale to the center. Exhale, twist to the left. Good. Couple more times. Inhale, center. Exhale, right. Inhale, center. Exhale, left. Good. Let's inhale back to center. Exhale, right hand comes down to the mat, left arm reaches up and over. Your forearm could come down if you like, or keep the elbow straight. Inhale, center. Exhale, left hand comes down, right arm reaches. Inhale, center. Exhale, right. Inhale, center. Exhale, left. Good. Inhale, center again. Exhale, bring the right hand down to the mat. Let your left ear fall to your left shoulder and let your left hand gently rest on the side of your head. Good. Inhale, center again. Extend the arms up. Exhale, left hand comes down, right ear falls to the right shoulder. Right hand gently rests on the side of the head. Inhale, center again. Exhale, bring the hands down to rest on the knees or on the legs. Let's push the shoulders forward, round the spine, chin down to the chest. Exhale. Inhale, roll the shoulders back, arch the spine, lift the chin. Good. Exhale, come back to that first position. Round the spine, bring the chin down to the chest. Inhale, arch the spine, lift the chin. Good. Exhale to the first position. Inhale to the second position. Exhale, come back to a neutral spine. Let's bring our big toes together, our knees wide. Here in a table position. Inhale. Exhale, extend the hips back towards the heels. Extend the arms forward for child's pose. Inhale, exhale, come to a seat once again, a comfortable seat. Place one hand over the heart and one hand over the belly. Inhale through the nose. Start to intentionally fill the chest with air and then fill the belly. Exhale. Release from the belly, release from the chest. Two more like this. Inhale. And exhale. One more. Inhale. And exhale. Release the hands, we'll sweep them up with an inhale, let the hands meet. Exhale the hands to heart center. Namaste.
Thank you. I appreciate those who were able to do the exercise and the practice of grounding. Feel free to kind of share in the chat what came up for you throughout the practice. And the reason why we are doing this and started in this way, enable my media, but move. is because of what I shared before on the topic of grief can be really hard to hear and to work through. And so creating space to be able to talk about or ground ourselves is really important. Some just really kind reminders to you and yourself. Take care of yourself throughout our conversation today. If something comes up for you, do not hesitate to kind of lean in and ask yourself what's happening for you. To learn to remind yourself that this is going to be uncomfortable conversations, as all of our conversations this week has been uncomfortable, but we're also here for you. And if there's any questions that you may have, feel free to send us a chat or use the Q&A, and we'll do our best to attend to your questions and your concerns, or even just reflections. My friend here, Curtis, is also here, but I also want to shout out to Tasia. She's my other amazing team member who's put a lot of this work together today, and she's also here to kind of encourage you and to also respond to any questions that you may have. So don't hesitate to share. So a really important part of, when we started off talking about the acknowledgement about our land and speaking about our ancestors, is because for so long, our connection with our ancestors, our connection with the people that came before us, was always mired with lots of shame and the experience of enslavement. So it was really important for me to even begin before that, when we were living in our villages or our communities or tribes, and we were thriving, and our very far 500-year ancestors really understood what change meant, and what transitioning was for communities and for people. And so I wanted to also tap into that knowledge, because that also will keep us as we're figuring out how to work through grief or figuring out how to work through loss. We are also in a world subjected and experiencing anti-Black racism. And so it's important for us to spend some time to acknowledge the impacts of anti-Black racism, and how it impacts our lives and how it impacts grieving and creates situations where we are subjected to further inequities, which then can contribute to experiences of grief and loss. As people, we're not experiencing any journey in life in isolation. It is always that communal impact. On a larger scale, as humans, we are all connected, and each experiences of others influence us. Yesterday, there was some horrible news that came out for a teacher in Toronto and a family in Ottawa. And even though I don't know those people or I'm not connected to them, it was still impactful. And that's kind of our experiences communally, that despite how separate we are as individuals, we have so much of shared experiences. An example, I had here was, many people see unhoused people all the time. And we don't often see how we're connected with people who are unhoused. When I was growing up, there was lots of narratives and judgments about people who lived on the streets or didn't have places to live. But that connection that we all have together really helps to build that divide. This interconnection encourages us to lead our lives with empathy, lead our lives with kindness and self-compassion, and examining how judgments about people is sometimes misguided and can be harmful. In that, we are all connected also in healing. For my brothers and sisters, we are just that. There is a unique responsibility that we all have to learn and to understand that experience that it has on each of us. So whichever identity that you hold today as you sit in this space, know that we are all connected. How far you are right now from all the way in Grenada to other places in the world, we are all very much connected. And this interconnection is what makes us powerful as a people. I'd like to just begin or start to highlight how anti-Black racism impact our community. And I saw this really quick clip online that I wanted to also share with you as well. I'm gonna share it on my other screen. So give me 1 second, I'll stop share. And in this clip, they talk about what anti-Black racism looks like in the community sphere. Not sure where it went. Like disappeared in cyberspace of my computer. There we go.
Me and my shadow exchange horror stories about being Black. I say to my shadow, I envy you. No one ever questions the quantity of your Blackness. You're never too Black or not Black enough. You are always just simply Black.
We are, without a doubt, in a moment in history, a potential turning point. It's time to hear the experiences of Canadians, the everyday racism they face, and their hope for change.
When you look around boardrooms, senior management, who's there? Do you see the representation of Black people in those roles, in positions of authority, in decision making?
We must address anti-Black racism in Canada, and we must continue to work to oppose it and to change it, to create a more equitable society for everybody. So as a medical student, I'm always thinking about how this manifests specifically in our healthcare system and how this changes health outcomes for Black and Indigenous Canadians compared to others.
Living queer and Black in Toronto means living with daily aggressions and invisibility. Being queer and Black sometimes means that I navigate erasure even in my own Black communities. But these issues aren't new. Homophobia isn't new, and racism certainly hasn't just now reared its ugly head. Black queer folk have always had to fight for a seat at the table.
Every institution that has a hand in the construction and the perpetuation of anti-Black racism, whether we're talking education systems, whether we're talking healthcare, whether we're talking policing, must be addressed.
Stop asking people of color what we are going to be doing about racism, because in a way that's blaming us for it. We are not responsible for its existence. It's something that happens to us. If you have the privilege, if you have the power, what are you going to do about racism?
And we're back in third quarter planning. Adams is quarterbacking this project.
How many of you would at least on
So you're like, why did I share this slide? I shared it to lead us up to the next part. In 2020, many scholars, many people are examining practices in Canada and how it's impacting our children, our youth, our adults, and our families. And back then, that was a very long time ago, we saw the media images of Black youth and men being arrested at disproportionate rates, if you remember. Children and youth coming into care due to poverty, young people being streamed from schools to jails, and people not being able to finance their homes. However, the focus was really on the individual and not addressing the system of racism. In that experience in itself, we saw loss. We saw families, parents leaving their children in Caribbean and Africa and transitioning to Canada to have a better life. That is loss. The impacts of the drug trade, of drug experiences, having members in your family addicted to substances is an example of loss. Generations of family, living in poverty, not able to shift to home ownership or to build equity for their families. I'm talking about financial equity. That's experience of loss. Black fathers not being able to have the ability to raise their children for a very long time in child welfare. They didn't even bother looking for Black fathers when the children came into care. That is experience of loss. Black or racialized women dying from childbirth. I can tell you 2 years ago, a family member shared with me that they lost a family member who had died from childbirth. That's an experience of loss. How many women go into the hospital, go see their doctors with fear because they don't know what the outcome is going to be like. And those are experiences of loss. I remember when my parents came to Canada, well, my parents lived in Canada first, and then I was living, but growing up with my parents, it was a lot of loss around not being able to spend time with their family. They missed out on weddings and special momentous occasions, and that is an experience of a loss. Having conflicts in families. So starting your family is however we start our families, and then conflict arising or challenges arriving within that family. And those are experiences of loss. Police surveillance, being picked off the street, interrogated for crimes. I have friends, an ex-partner who was picked up by the police years ago and spent, over a day in interrogation for something that he was profiled, right? Those are experiences of loss. And these experiences are rooted in practices that are embedded within anti-Blackness, anti-Black racism. And what happens is it contributes to that sense of stress that we experience within our lives, within the individual, within the family, within the community. And it also impacts rates of death, people dying earlier, or people feeling disconnected as well. I wanted to give some pause if anyone wants to share any thoughts. And Curtis, what's coming up for you as we talk about the types of loss that our community experiences?
When I look at loss, I look at the word opportunity. What have we lost over time? It's opportunity, be it financial, be it in our own health, our mental stability. How the loss is perpetuated over time, generations. And if there's no opportunity, then it sort of impedes on our ability to have a better future in life. It takes away from our mental capacity. It takes away from us feeling good about ourselves, taking away the shame that we face because we're not able to, live in a decent neighborhood, drive a good car, get a proper education, lost opportunities. That is still happening today. There are a lot of young people that would love to go to universities. They don't have the opportunity. It's a lost opportunity. And it is so deep that it runs through generations, because if a young male don't have that opportunity that he can provide for his family, then the family unit suffers, and their ability to advance and to grow and to better themselves are at a loss, always at a disposition, where they're always having to fight, even just to survive, just to get by. And it takes away, it adds to the pain and the grief that we feel from the family unit. And again, from the word opportunity. When I looked at that video, I looked at the last part of it, and there was a question that was asked. They keep asking us what we are going to do about it. They created the problem. and they're asking us what are we going to do about it. And it's like, what have you done about it, and what are you going to do about it? They hold the key. They created and they designed a system that we would never involve, but yet we are part of it. And it's just a sad thing.
Thank you. You spoke facts. And feel free, anyone, if there's something comes up for you to share as well. Absolutely. I wanted to land our conversation with acknowledging that the system that was built was really built on the belief that being close to white or whiteness is supreme, and that darkness is seen as evil. And a basic example is a couple weeks ago, I was watching a show and they reiterated, the belief, remember, that we all had, that if you cross paths with a black cat, it was considered bad luck, or thinking of angels, they only were white. And what happens is it becomes internalized. So as Curtis talked about those experiences of loss, connected with that young Black male who's just striving to come out in the world, he starts to internalize that it's about him. And then we begin to act in ways where we also believe that whiteness is supreme. We've also brought in the fact that the ills in the Black community was rooted in the individual, and it turns our judgment towards family members, Black people, and the community. And we've heard it. We've heard people, disparage our community or disparage who we are as individuals. And then this becomes generalized to other community members, such as 2S LGBTQ, those who hold Muslim faith, those who don't speak English is not their first language. So those stereotypes and discrimination and biases continues within so many different aspects. What is inevitable is that as Black Canadians, we will experience implicit and explicit forms of racism throughout our lives. And it does lead to poor outcomes, acts of violence. And our role here today is not just to harper on those experiences, but to provide us ways of moving forward and healing. I reference this story a lot, and Curtis brought it up as well. If you read the book, Raised in the Sun, it was written by Lorraine Hansberry. And in the story, she writes, what happens to the dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? And really the story is about, this Black man searching for the American dream. And as he's doing so, as he's striving to make something better of himself, as we all do, right? We work really hard. He experiences a lot of systemic issues that continue to complicate his capacity to achieve success. And what happens, it really begins to take a toll on his emotional and mental health. And he learns unhealthy ways to come to realize that his dream is not going to be realized. And it not only breaks his emotional, mental spirit, but it also breaks him. And so how many of us have had those dreams that we've had that never came true? And thinking about, what were the barriers that you faced to getting to that dream? And as you did not achieve your dream, or as you experienced challenges, what did it do to you? What did it do to your ability to dream? And that's where we're hoping to land our conversation. I picked up this quote from The Healing Wisdom of Africa. So one thing that brings us all together is loss and the fear of loss. And I'm hoping that through our conversation that it doesn't separate us, but it actually brings us together, and that we find new ways of supporting each other, those who look like us and those who don't, and those who have intersections of our identity as well. So what is a common experience? How do we wrap this up? In the experience of Black people, we all carry feelings of shame. I think we were raised that way, and it continues with us because of all those barriers that we experience. We begin to internalize it, so that believing that we're flawed and unworthy of love, that's what that shame is about. We also carry generational trauma. When I started this conversation, we started talking about our ancestors who lived in Africa before enslavement, before colonization, and that DNA has passed down throughout our generations. We talked about the African people who survived the Middle Passage, who experienced, hundreds of centuries of enslavement. Their DNA lives within us. The experiences of our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and their lives and their protection of themselves and their survival tactics, that lives in us too. And some of the patterns that have developed over time are our adaptive ways of healing. On Monday in our panel discussion, we talked about how, simple things such as, I know it's not simple, but like the way that parents would discipline their children is rooted in enslavement. And so we all have held on and carried on generational trauma as well. Common themes is taken from Dr. Ken Hardy. If you've heard of him, Google him. He provides really amazing knowledge, especially when it comes to young people, in understanding their behaviors, their experiences, their mental health. And so he talked about the fact that when we start to internalize racism, there are 4 major things that happen, and that we hold on to inner rage, whether it's rage that we show to other people that looks like anger, disengagement, or rage that we hold within ourselves, which may look like substance abuse, self-harm. We begin to internalize whiteness, that we feel that, yes, we're not good, and that white is better, and that's what we strive for. We also hold on to those internalized feelings of shame. Dr. Joy DeGruy, who is another brilliant speaker who talks about the experiences of post-traumatic slave syndrome, really heightens that experiences that the experience of enslavement has passed down. And so we were acting in ways in which our trauma responses, right? And trauma responses can be anything from like responding to startled responses to behaving in ways that are maladaptive, not helpful for us, but it's all we need, all we know in terms of like how to be, how to live. And then the final piece is that within the Black community, and I think someone shared before in the chat, we have a hard time trusting systems. I have a hard time trusting doctors, police officers, social workers that work in the field with me, politicians, who decide laws and systems of way of being, because I don't know what could happen. And that experience of violence that has happened in the past, that has happened to my community members, is something that's very real to me. And so that impacts our ability to access support and help, which is why we have this week of talking about Black mental health, because we are conditioned to believe that that we cannot seek or we cannot access support for our mental health. I'm going to pause really quickly just to give Curtis anything else that I missed or that I should add in this list.
It boils down to, when you look at it, again, the loss continues. Day to day, we go through that loss. Just looking at the slide that is in front of us, that shame, it's a continuous journey. It's a walk of shame. It's a hall of shame that we go through. We have individuals that they're ashamed of their own Blackness. They got individuals who've tried and are attempting to somehow change that outward look of themselves, that they're not proud of their Blackness. And colonialization has caused us to feel that, to go down that road of shame, nappy hair, and all these different things that we sort of self-inflict on ourselves. That adds to the shame that is bestowed upon us, that we left not with a good feeling about ourselves, and that's a continuous loss, because now you got to deal with your own self-awareness, your own feeling good about yourself, And this leads to mental disorders. You go through depression, you go through other different mental stuff that actually destabilizes you as to who you are. Instead of embracing your identity, embracing your Blackness, and realizing that, look, you're unique. You know, you are a treasured person, and there's nothing wrong with you. So it's sad that we still go through that type of loss that is called shame. And until we can really find ourselves and get over that hurdle, then we'll be able to remove the stain of that shame, regardless of where it's coming from.
This is why Curtis is my co-facilitator. Thank you. It's beautiful. This is my favorite quote. A tree is strong because of its root. In the midst of all of this that we talked about, it's important for me to land on the importance of that many of us also hold on to resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. However, for Black individuals, it's more than just bouncing back. It's finding ways to reclaim ourselves, to reclaim our joy, and through very difficult experiences, being able to move forward. Our resilience is related to our ancestors. And I invite you to think about some of your relatives who endured atrocities. What are their names? Just say them, mention them in the chat. And how do you remember them? How do you remember their resilience? Our resilience is rooted in our joy and that sense of cultural pride. It is grounded in resistance, because that's what got us here, right? Is our resistance. That parts of ourselves that resisted efforts that were designed to destroy us. And if you have anything else, that I missed anything when it comes to resilience and resistance, please do not hesitate to share. So I appreciate everyone who's come today. I will give you a very beautiful copy of the slides. So I'm glad you all signed in with your email accounts. I'll send you the slides after, so you'll have the opportunity to review. And I also, for those who have to leave us at 1 o'clock, no worries. It is being live streamed and we will record it. So you're always welcome to access the video thereafter. But those who could stay, please do, because we have some more information for you. You know, we started and grounded our conversation in being grounded and talking about the impact of anti-Black racism. And I just want to spend some time really talking about that grief journey. What we know about it is that loss is inevitable. It's going to happen to us. And sometimes how we respond to grief experiences is connected to the Western world of thinking of how we deal with trauma. So we can run away from it, or we can become really frightened and try to avoid loss from happening. And we can also become very immobilized and not move. And there's another one, and I just can't remember what that is, but we all have different ways and responses to grief. We all will act differently. And that grief journey is never linear. It's all over the place. It's messy. It's inconsistent. And it's important for us to know that and remember that as we experience grief experiences in our life. And I pulled this quote from Dalai Lama: "Tragedy should be utilized as a source of strength, no matter what sort of difficulties, how painful the experience. If we lose our hope, that is a real disaster." And I really share this as a hope for, you know, we may not be there in our journey of grief at that point where we feel it as a strength, but it is part of our story. And even the most difficult parts of our story are also designed to help us grow and to help us to become better people or better humans. There are many types of loss that we've talked about before. And so I will, you know, briefly go over the types of loss that we experience. And there's also different types of grief. So grief that is, we know that it's going to happen, to grief that it's very, very quick, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know that it was going to happen. And there's grief that is also masked, that we don't share that grief with other people. And so people don't know that we're holding on to really difficult experiences. And then there's a grief that we've talked a lot about today, where it's disenfranchised, where we feel that loss is because of our lost opportunities and lost access to the things that we need in our life. We also have, sorry, I skipped a slide, distorted grief, grief that becomes secondary. So at the beginning of our chat, I talked about an experience that happened on the news. I mean, that's an example of secondary losses. Even recently, there was a great person in Malvern who passed away that lots of people knew about, and just watching videos about this gentleman's life, that's an experience of secondary loss. I may not have known him, but his story was really powerful, and that's an experience of grief and loss. And we can also talk about the symptoms. I mean, there's some here, but the symptoms are personalized to us, and they're about our experiences. And so that is something that we need to keep in mind when we're grieving. Many, many years ago, I think it was 1960, someone came up with, and I can't remember her name, I should know, but I can't remember her name, but she came up with 5 stages of grief. And she came up with shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, resolution. And honestly, it didn't capture everything. And so I came up with a couple that I thought of. There's a Instagram page, I think it's Untangled Grief, and they came up with so many others. But grief isn't about stages. It isn't about going through this process that we go through, that there's so many different experiences that come with grief that we need to also honor and respect that happens in our life. And so I added my own as well. And the healing piece, which we brought up earlier, the importance of that when we go through grieving experiences, whether it's the loss of someone to a loss that people don't even know about, that's happened with us. The fact that we're able to do so together also helps to promote that healing and growth. And so last year, this is my auntie. Last year, out of nowhere, my aunt was diagnosed with cancer, and within 3 months, she passed away. And I remember she didn't share with everybody her diagnosis. She didn't share what was happening. And I don't even think her children knew fully what was happening. And going through that experience taught me a lot about grief. You know, how do we anticipate, or what do we do when we're anticipating someone passing away? And I described that situation where, you know, my cousins didn't know how to plan around what happens if she's unresponsive in the hospital, or how does she transfer her house to her children, or what happens to her retirement plan. So some of that strategic stuff. And how do we allow someone who's transitioning to transition in a good way when we're still dealing with our own grief? And then after all of that's wrapped up and she's passed away and we've planned the funeral and the repast, then what happens? What does grieving look like? And that's what I spent an entire year just focusing on. What does that grieving look like? And does it end at a certain point, or does it stay with us forever? And these are some of the truths that I came up with. And I'm sure you have your own truth, and I invite you to share what that truth is for you. The other important piece of the loss was when I looked at her life legacy. And my auntie was a very strong woman who really wanted to actually come to Canada, and she wasn't able to. And she married another member of my dad's family, so she's kind of double related to me. But the marriage didn't go well. It was really hard on her, but she stuck it out. And so she experienced, as I said, 20 years of intimate partner violence. And then she was able to survive and move through that relationship and get a really good job with the government in working with people who are incarcerated. And she worked a lot. She worked hard. And I looked at her life and said, she spent a lot of her time in her life working or trying to survive or trying to thrive. And that in itself was a loss, to know that her story ended so quickly. And so many of us have experienced and encountered people whose stories have ended so quickly. So we welcome the pain. We welcome that it's going to be painful and that there is no end date to that pain, and that pain can be continuous and it can come up at the most inopportune times. But it's part of that journey, and being able to accept and sit in that pain is really important. I know I'm a workaholic and working is like my thing. And, you know, I reflected a couple weeks ago, 4 years ago, my cousin was shot and killed. I found out about it at like 5 in the morning. And at 8 o'clock, I was at work. And as a community, we often, you know, have ways of just figuring out how we move on. We got to work, we got to pay bills, we got to do this, right? And not giving ourselves the time that we need to like truly grieve. And not doing so then can also lead to further experiences of loss, because we haven't had the opportunity to fully work through the feelings of grief that we've had. So knowing yourself, knowing when it's time to say, I need a day, knowing when it's time to deplug, knowing when it's time to not go to work or not continue and just stay in bed all day. The things that you need to grieve is an important part of that grieving process. And the last, probably the most important thing that I learned is that you need to trust yourself in the process. You know, often when speaking to my family members about their own grief experience and how they experienced the loss of my auntie, the loss of my cousin, you know, they said, we got to move on. Life moves on. We just move. And they had a hard time sitting in grief. And so I learned that sitting in grief just allowed me to be able to work through those processes of healing, to shift the story so that my generation, my future children, my nephews can have a different viewpoint of grieving and loss that finds its way to healing. As we begin to just wrap up in a way of talking about our healing, talking about how do we get to that point of healing, I wanted to also give space for those who have stories that they want to share. And Curtis, if you have any stories that you want to share about your own experiences before we move on.
Just a quick story in terms of the passing of my own mom. That was a bit of anticipation of grief for the mere fact that, you know, she did fell ill, and not that she suffered long. It was quite quick just the same. But I knew what was next, and I had to face the reality of it. So when I got the news, which was, I always remember it was on a Friday, it was just about 20 after 4 in the morning. And when the phone rang and I answered the phone, I was already prepared for the news that was on the other line. Because the days leading up to it, I had already started to prepare myself emotionally, mentally, and everything else. I started to look and reflect on my mom's contribution to us, you know, her children without a father, a single mom, and how she kept us, you know, from off the streets, from trouble and everything else. She did her best to provide for us, help and shape and molding our character and who we are today. So I kept holding on to those things that even when the time came, I was able to stand. And having to fly back to Trinidad, it was the first time in years going back to Trinidad and knowing that your mom is not going to be there to receive you. And that was a lot to actually go through. But yet, I found the strength. And again, where I found the strength was I kept reminding myself of the good things, the times that I've shared with my mom. I always had time for my mom. It matters not. We spoke almost every day or every other day. And her wisdom that she passed on and everything else, So that's the pictures that I hold on to. And even today, and having to stand, I had to participate in her burial from a ministerial point of view. Never thought I was able to actually do that, but I was able to do it, give the eulogy and everything else, and to stand and not break down and everything else, support, my other siblings and everything. So I was handling my grief and their grief and everybody else's grief all at the same time. But what kept me, like I said, is being prepared. There's no, it's not a one-size-fits-all, understandably, but just being prepared. And I take it one day, one step at a time. I still remember, I still reflect. I don't look back at how long ago since her passing or anything like that, because she's forever with me, so one day at a time, one step at a time, and that's how I do it. And I keep it rolling, keep it moving. There's no how long or how much time is enough or anything like that. You just allow yourself to feel and go through whatever emotions that you feel. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And no one can tell you how to feel or get over it. So just allow yourself that space and your own time and way that you would heal. It's not going to go away. But again, like a gentle breeze, I just remember and reminded always of her goodness and what she instilled in us, that we still live today. And because of that, so we still live in her, by our lives, our character, our person, who we are today, continuing, carrying on those traits that she instilled in us. We still live in it. So she lives on through the way that we live, always representing her. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Curtis. What a great reminder too. They live on in our hearts. They're always going to be there. And there isn't any time limit, for sure. So I appreciate everyone who stayed with us. This is a heavy, heavy topic, so feel free to check in and let us know where you're at. And by no means talking about hope, we're not trying to silver line it. We're just also letting you know that two things can exist: hope, repair, restoration, as well as pain, grief, loss, abandonment. Two things can exist. And that creating space for that helps us to heal and helps us to move forward. I also wanted to highlight in this very cryptic drawing is that healing is holistic. And so it's not just about us telling ourselves or telling other people it's time to move on. We also have to feel it. We also have to understand it. We also have to remember it. We also have to connect with other people to remember that as well. And that is an important part to healing. And we did talk about it, sorry, I'm skipping through. We did talk about it in our first discussion on Monday, just around the fact that our bodies need to heal as much as our other parts of ourselves, right? Other parts of who we are. Our bodies hold our trauma, it holds our grief, it holds our loss. When I was speaking about my auntie, and after she had passed, I had planned a lot of activities with my cousin to do some things, because I was like, I wanted to help them heal by remembering her birthday, because we used to celebrate her birthday every year. So I was like, we had to do this, and we had to do other momentous things together. But throughout that time period, I think from like the beginning of when we started, so like June, to like the end of that process, I had this like ongoing pain in my back. I wasn't walking properly. I was limping. I couldn't stand for too long. And it was my therapist who highlighted to me that I must be holding on to a lot. And that's a very like simple explanation of how our bodies hold on to pain. And sometimes it looks like, you know, heart attacks. It looks like panic attacks. You know, Stephen talked about it Monday, you know, how he was holding on to things and ended up having a panic attack because of everything happening within his body, you know, becoming manifested because he wasn't paying attention to it. And very much so, you know, I felt that in so many different ways. And so when it comes to healing, as we started off with our breath and being able to stretch and being able to move, you know, being mindful of that importance of being able to find healing through our bodies. You know, other simple things that we can do, we can dance, we can swim, we can climb, we can walk, we can do activities that allow us to release some of that tensions within our bodies and bring us closer to healing, whether it's through the other parts of ourselves. Am I missing other things? If anyone else wants to share what other things they do with their bodies that help them heal, Curtis, any other ideas that you have? Rocking helps. So you've seen me do that a couple of times. And I remember when I was little, like when my mom was like putting me to sleep or even doing my hair, she would rock and she would sing. And for me, I think that was her part of her healing, right? Being able to use movement to help her heal. Our minds. Sometimes in our thoughts and our processes, when we're thinking about grief, you know, we can have some dark thoughts. We can have some things in our minds that don't often make sense, right? Or are not always helpful for us. As we shared before, we can start to internalize, you know, the negative experiences that we have throughout our day-to-day life, or even addressing systems that we encounter. And sometimes that can impact how we feel or how we are. And so one thing that's been really helpful to me is just being able to critically reflect, to always ask myself questions like, why am I doing this? Why am I thinking this? Why am I saying this? Where is this coming from? And also being open to learn, to know that we don't know all the answers in our journey of life, and that sometimes we need to learn new things or understand things in a different way, or adopt more of a binary or duality in our thought process, that not everything is black or white, that there is some gray. It also helps to have goals, to set plans, to look forward to the future. And that also helps us to be able to work through some of the grief experiences. And so part of, you know, going back to what I shared with my auntie, being able to plan a summer of like fun for my cousins was something I was able to look forward to doing, because I wanted to look beyond just the sadness of her passing. Anything you wanted to add, Curtis?
Yeah, staying in the now, taking really control of your thoughts, not allowing your thoughts to run away with you and getting too far ahead of yourself. You know, where you sort of like worrying or whatever it is in advance of the actual time. You know, there's 24 hours in a day, but yet, you know, you need 60 seconds makes a minute, and 60 minutes that is going to give you an hour. So you can only go through life or go through each day really 1 second at a time. And it's as those seconds add up, you're going to go into an hour, and as the hours add up, you're going to go into a day. So taking control of your thoughts and staying in the now and appreciating that very moment in time you know, that you have an opportunity right now, not later on, not tomorrow, but right now, to decide which direction you're going to go, how you're going to feel in that moment. And when you guard your mind and slow down your thought process and not allow it to run away with you, it keeps you grounded, and it helps you to stay in control of your emotions and how you choose to really feel within that time.
Amen. Absolutely, Ashe. And I would add, if you're struggling, you know, to seek support. To seek support. I'm gonna see if we can hear it.
There's things that person did that weren't reconciled.
Can you hear the video?
Yeah.
Okay. So I found this video just talking about grief. And this woman is, you know, sharing her experience of grief and how she was able to work through some of her emotions. So that's what the video is about. And I'll press play.
Things like wherever your relationship was with that person, good or bad, anger comes up, you know what I'm saying? And that's usually the first layer, you know what I'm saying? You're going through anger, and then you're going through acceptance, and then you're going through, you know, how to maneuver and go through life without, you know, someone. I'm still kind of in that process, like, what will my adult life, especially like coming into my 30s, like what will that look like without the presence of my father? And still kind of grieving those things that I know he won't be able to experience. But I think the biggest thing that I learned in grief is that God's not afraid of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's been times where I would go and I would literally just scream, like, God, I hate you. Like, I'm cursing God out. Like, you know, all of that. Like, just allowing that to flow through me to God. And then literally when the dust is clear, like, I'm just like, peace. You know what I mean? And it's scary to think, because you would think that, like, you know, you shouldn't talk to God that way. Like, God's been too good for you to be, you know, mad or this and that. And it's like, God don't care. God cares more about the fact that you're actually coming to him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Than the fact that you're actually angry. So I think that was the biggest thing that I learned, that I'm learning still as I'm walking through.
Thank you, Tasia. I posted that video because I also struggled with those emotions, right? Right after my auntie had passed, one of my girlfriends, I hadn't heard from her in like 3 months. I'm like, what's happening? And she also had passed away so quickly from cancer. And so at that point, I was angry. And being able to express that anger is helpful. Being able to talk about the disappointment, the sadness, all the other emotions that come with that experience of grief is helpful, because holding it in means that we've internalized it, or we're showing that anger towards other people whose fault it is not their own for the things that have happened. It's also important for us to find ways of feeling safe and loved. And it connects with that community piece. When we feel connected to other people, then we feel that there isn't an isolation when it comes to grief. That is a shared experience amongst people. And that helps us work through that grief, which is why we have, you know, rituals that are around staying together, staying connected. Being able to find that safe space to express how we feel, but also being able to pour ourselves into others when we can and when we're ready. And so for me, being able to do this work, being able to provide a little bit of love and support and guidance to other people also helped my heart to be filled. It also helped me to see that the losses that I've experienced were not in vain. And we hold two truths, right? So we can hold anger, we can hold sadness, but we can also hold joy. We can also hold love. And those experiences help us through. And feel free to use the chat if I'm missing or there's other experiences that you wanted to also share. An important part is feeding into our souls. So making sure that we are feeling grounded, making sure that we're able to access our breath, access water when we need, and that we're filling into our souls as much as possible. The last speaker talked about, how she had conversations with God, and that helped feed her soul. Being able to have conversations with your spiritual power, with God, or even being able to use prayer or spirituality to help you work through the experiences of grief is really important to help us to move forward. Being able to see purpose or reason for living also helps us to feel inspired and to be able to remain connected to our experiences, even when grief wants to disconnect us, even when grief wants to keep us angry and disappointed. We're able to find that inner power, find that higher power to help us to move forward. And wanted to share with you, some of healing practices that I've done in the past as well. So I shared lots about being grounded, but also around using our culture and having cultural pride. That also helps us to heal. Being able to connect with each other, being able to connect with our spiritual beings, and creating opportunities to see success. So my other story that I wanted to share was I went on this journey of healing for a year and trying to tap into so many different things. But when my auntie died, my auntie was born on July 6th, and my nephew was born July the 14th. So a couple of days after her. And honestly, this child has been amazing for grief. He loves you unconditionally. He makes you laugh. You can kiss him up and he takes it in. He says amazing things, and just being able to see his life is also what helps to heal. Shortly after my aunt passed, my other cousin had a baby as well. And so there was life that balanced out the really difficult things that we had to go through. And being mindful of that is really important. I just wanted to also say thank you so much for sharing in the chat. I really appreciate hearing from you. Thank you. Sorry, Curtis, do you have anything else to add? I didn't realize I was going to the second to last slide. So yes, anything else you wanted to add to about healing practices?
Yeah, it's okay to feel. Allow yourself to feel. Don't put your emotions and your feelings. Don't incarcerate your own self and your own mind. It's okay to feel. Even when we're mad at God, God is not mad at us. God understands our humanity and our emotions. It's okay. Spirituality is not a religion. It's just who we are. It's not something that you try. It's ourself. We're more than what we see when we look in a mirror. It's beyond that. So that's what we actually tap into, to help part of that healing process, what we do on a daily, how we go through life, how we continue along the journey, because it's not ended. Life continues, and life continues even beyond the grave.
Absolutely, absolutely. We had someone in the chat who talked about just the derailment, right? So there, sometimes in our grief and loss, like we can get to the point where we're not well or we're not okay. I have a lot of family friends, but I'll mention this. But my brother recently lost, last year, his family member lost 3 of their children. And I remember him saying like he's not good. He's not good. And I think that if you've learned anything here today, is to learn that it's okay not to be good. It's okay if we need to seek the support that we need, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's supportive family around you, because our experiences of grief are not good, right? And there is never an expectation for us. There should never be an expectation for us to move forward until we're ready. And it's okay to rely on that support if we need to. And it doesn't make us less of a person. Last night, we had our men's panel, and Danny Stone had mentioned, or he had talked about, I'm going to misquote him, but that us asking for help and accessing support is our strength. And so the reminder of that is really important. And I just also wanted to share that the speaker had talked, or the chat had shared just the importance of Zumba and being able to have music and dance and movement. All of those things are very critical to our healing. So thank you for sharing your story. I see you, I hear you, and completely 100% understand and know that you're doing the best in terms of your healing, whatever that might be. And as we 2 minutes left, I wanted to end on one of my favorite quotes from Audre Lorde, and she is a brilliant writer and speaker and activist who passed away, but had left us so many amazing gems when it comes to like understanding rest, understanding the importance of caring for ourselves. And she writes in this speech that she made, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And so I'll leave you with my closing thoughts in terms of whatever grief experience that you're going through, whether it's around the loss of life, to the loss of experience and opportunities, to the grief of, having to hold on to so much racial and generational trauma. We've been taught to, not focus on ourselves and not focus on rest, but I invite you and encourage you to do so and to take care of yourself, to put yourself first, to ensure that you're pouring into your cup as much as you're giving out to other people. I hope that the resources that we shared today will help you along your journey, and know that it is a journey, that it isn't something that ends at a certain time. As Curtis said, like, you hold on to that person that you've lost, those experiences that you've given up for the rest of your life, and know that, and I hope that they will just only help encourage your heart to be bigger and greater. And Curtis, I'll let you say the final words.
Yeah, keep on living, keep on loving. Life is beautiful. Life is a wonderful journey. It's a wonderful experience. And as we navigate our way through life, there's going to be ups and downs. But these are designed not to, it's actually designed to strengthen us, that, we discover our true self and our strengths, that we can survive the things that has been thrown at us from slavery days, colonialization, and even up to this time, that we're still here and we're not going to go away. Even though we've lost some good soldiers in the battle, but they've also taught us a lot, that we can now use that knowledge to make the change that we want to see and we want to be in this life and the life to come. Blessings.
Thank you. Thank you for community for being here today. As I shared, I'll send you the slides and the resources that we did today. And thank you for sharing your heart and just watching us as we work through our experiences of grief. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Happy Friday. Happy International Women's Day.
Yes, to all the queens on the panel. Blessings.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.